So I took a little bit of a break from the content creation, but now, much like Alabama recruiting, much like Alabama football, college football is back, and so too am I. And today, we've got a lot we have to unpack. We need to talk about several top-tier prospects who are listing Alabama in their top schools, which is a great sign for Alabama fans, but we also need to talk about Alabama getting in a massive flip this weekend, something we've got to break down. But before we can, as always, y'all know the drill. I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Are you excited that Antonio Coleman flipped back to the Crimson Tide? Let me know what you're thinking. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification. I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And where do we begin? I think the perfect place for us to begin to really pave the way for this conversation is to talk about all of these prospects that are releasing their top lists, and Alabama is squarely planted, because for me, that's a big deal. Alabama is starting to get within striking distance of several top prospects around high school football recruiting. Top prospects who are releasing their top lists, and there is a trend happening. Whenever Kalen DeBoer was hired, whenever he assembled this staff, there was one chief question opposing fan bases had. Can he recruit in the SEC? Listen, we've seen Kalen DeBoer win. We've seen him develop, but we have not seen him recruit top 5, top 10 classes. Would he be able to do that in the SEC? Well, so many Alabama fans out there said, well, he's never had a brand like the Alabama Crimson Tide, to which other fan bases began questioning Alabama's brand. However, over the course of the past month, those questions have started to dissipate, especially when you have a 5-star wide receiver like Caleb Cunningham say, listen, Alabama's wide receiver you, especially when you have a 5-star defensive lineman in the state of Georgia not only listing Alabama in his top schools, but another 5-star lineman in the state of Georgia saying Alabama develops as good as anywhere. The Alabama brand is alive and well, and right now we need to dive into some prospects that are taking notice as to what Alabama could offer. First and foremost, we need to go with Elijah Griffin. Number 3 overall player in the nation per the 24/7 Sports Composite, the number 1 defensive lineman, the number 1 player in the state of Georgia. Now, he just recently released his top school list, and Alabama was there. And in no way, shape, or form am I saying that that means this is an Alabama win. What I am saying is that so many fan bases out there tried to convince Alabama fans everywhere, and really tried to convince themselves that Alabama wasn't going to be able to recruit, that Alabama didn't have a brand, that Nick Saban was the sole reason for Alabama's brand. And listen, I'm not going to argue that Nick Saban didn't give a ton to the Alabama brand, and I'm not going to argue that Nick Saban didn't have his own brand to coincide with Alabama's brand. That's absolutely true. But the Crimson Tide do have a brand. It's the reason why you still hear so many of these top prospects saying, no, Alabama is still absolutely a place to go, even though Nick Saban's not there. And whenever you have a 5-star defensive lineman, such as Elijah Griffin, put Alabama in their top list, it does mean something, if only to say, hey, they're still a player in terms of recruiting top prospects in college football. And though some of you may be sitting there saying, hey, this isn't noteworthy, at the point where Nick Saban is no longer there, at the point where so many people inside the fan base and certainly outside the fan base has been questioning this staff's recruiting ability, I certainly do think that it is a conversation piece we need to have. So Elijah Griffin putting Alabama in his top schools, this is absolutely something we're going to have to keep an eye on. Look, we've talked about this extensively, but retaining Freddie Roach, that was massive. There's no overstating what that means, because even though there's so much new, even though Alabama's brand is still there, it's still attractive, if you're able to retain top recruiters within that brand, it's going to help you, and as it has helped right here. We move forward. What about Kalen DeBoer, a top running back in the nation, and he just released his top 12, which Alabama is firmly planted in. Kalen DeBoer is a top 70 prospect in all of high school football, a top 5 running back in the nation, and a top 5 player in the state of Mississippi. And we just got done talking about another top player in the state of Mississippi, and Caleb Cunningham, who will be visiting Alabama soon, and you already know more conversations are on the way about that young man. You just wait for that one. But Kalen DeBoer, very talented individual. Per the 24/7 Sports Composite, as I stated, is a top 70 prospect and is a running back prospect you would love to have. But I'm not going to be surprised when offensive skilled players look at Alabama and this current coaching staff and say, hey, we have to hear that pitch. Just look at what Dylan Johnson just did for Washington, where he went over 1,200 yards, 230 plus carries, averaging 4 yards plus. And really the only reason you saw his production diminish any in the postseason was because he was so banged up. But this offense under Kalen DeBoer has put out really powerful running games before, and I absolutely think that's going to continue. It's why Turbo Rogers is still in the class, but you're looking to add in another running back. Could it be an Ackland Deer? Keeping on the offensive side of the ball, we go to C.J. Wiley, the 6'4" wide receiver who is a top 250 prospect in all of high school football per the 24/7 Sports Composite, a top wide receiver, and a notable player in the state of Georgia. And I've started to notice a trend with the Alabama wide receiver prospects. This new staff, if they can get you at a 6'4", a 6'3", they are all down. Now, that's not to say that they're not going to be looking at wide receivers who are 5'11" and up, but there have been a lot of 6'4", 6'3" guys offered here recently, and I'm really interested to see what it means. Another one from the state of Georgia we have to keep our eye on, Travis Smith, another tall, lanky wide receiver, but they're not diminishing any of their athleticism in favor of physicality. They have both, and that's why they're such sought-after targets. So, C.J. Wiley, Travis Smith, names we're going to have to keep up with. And last, but certainly not least, we get to David Sanders, the number 2 player in all of high school football per the 24/7 Sports Composite, and the number 1 offensive tackle in the nation. And Alabama has had a successful string of 5-star offensive tackles they've been able to recruit, develop, and send to the first round of the NFL draft. Could David Sanders be the next in line? Well, he just dropped his top 6, and Alabama is there. And if you're an Alabama fan, you've got to love that. David Sanders was someone you were chipping away at before, but the fact that you remain in his top school list, even after all the change, it goes to show the Alabama brand is there, and he's intrigued by what this offense is going to put together. I can't wait to see how Coach Cap is able to hit the trail running, especially after someone like a David Sanders. But the time is now. We now need to talk about the big win Alabama got this weekend, and that's flipping top 100 prospect, top defensive lineman out the state of Alabama, Antonio Coleman from Auburn to the Crimson Tide. And if you're an Alabama fan, you already know that's sweet. Anytime you can get one over on your rival, it's awesome, especially whenever your rival was able to flip Coleman from you. You just got one back. And for Alabama, it's a big win. Antonio Coleman flipped away from Alabama before Nick Saban had retired. And now Alabama gets him back even though Saban's not in the building. And as I said earlier, there's no overstating what retaining Freddie Roach meant. He is a fantastic recruiter. He is great in the state of Alabama, and he grants familiarity to a lot of these defensive line prospects. And that's where so many of you are interested. How is Alabama going to recruit the defensive line? That's the big reason why retaining Freddie Roach is huge. But it wasn't just Freddie Roach here. We need to give credit where it's due. Antonio Coleman has a relationship with Ryan Williams. They went to the same high school. And apparently Kane Womack was huge in this battle. They have a pre-existing relationship from when Womack was at South Alabama, and it carried over, and he was a real selling point. So for Alabama, a lot is happening. You get a flip this weekend. You get several top prospects releasing their top school lists, and Alabama square in the hunt for several of the most gifted high school athletes in the nation. On top of that, you have practice starting again, and of course, we're going to be here to wade through it all. I can't wait to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.